What if you could transform your biggest problem into an opportunity and see real-time transformation and learn from the challenges of some of the most intriguing leaders in the world? That's what the signature leadership process, the PRO format, is all about. You see, through a combination of executive, speed coaching, and handwriting analysis, I help world-class leaders not only uncover their authentic selves, but communicate their vision in a way that's personable, relatable, and motivating. Now, we're going to go through what's called my PRO framework. We start with the person's problem, we then look how to reframe it through their handwriting, and then look at the opportunity about how they can implement a solution, all within 20 minutes. And you're going to see some of the most intriguing authors, thought leaders, musicians, athletes, and more in a way they've never shared before, through their stories, through their real challenges that they have with a bit of vulnerability. And through that, you're going to be able to project your own challenge to see what you could learn from their process that they're going through as leaders. I'll see you on the Signature Leadership Podcast to see what you can do to transform your biggest problem into an opportunity for immediate growth. Hi, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show Cumulative Edition. Here we're going to look at what some of the highlights were over the course of the past month and a half of the Signature Leadership Show, where world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves, and in the process, we uncover ours. Episode number 34, From Doctor to Musician, with Arya M. Sharma, MD, one of the leading obesity doctors in the world, turned bluegrass musician, the journey of reinvention.
So one of the skills you have to learn is how do I even ask those questions? And what do I do with the answers? Right. But before I ask the question, I kind of have to know, why am I even asking these questions, right? And this was also something I learned from a professor who told me, he said, you know what, Dr. Sharma, if the answer doesn't matter, don't ask the question. If the answer matters, make sure you get an answer. And those were the two very important pieces of advice in taking a history, right? So I could ask you all kinds of questions, but if I don't know what the answer is, so when I ask you a question, I already kind of say, what are the possible answers that you could give me? You know, it could be a, yes, no. If you answer this question with a no, what is that going to mean to, making the diagnosis going on there? Or if you said a yes, where do we go with this? Everything in life ends up being a game. And what you try to do is you try to understand the rules. You try to play by those rules. You may end up, like in any game, bend the rules as much as you can, but stay within the framework of what the game allows you to do. And then just see how far you can get, right? And then you keep playing the game, you keep getting better at it. And a lot of that stuff turns out to be very generic skills. So what I'm learning right now is, and realizing, is that a lot of the skills that I had that made me successful, as a professor, as a teacher, as a doctor, translate beautifully to, this next stage of my life, which is basically starting from scratch, but in a completely different field. And it turns out that it's not all that different. So, sort of when you reflect on all of the things that, all the ups and downs, and so, there's no regrets, right? There's no, there's not this thing, had I done such and such, this or this might have happened. I would say, part of this whole resilience and perseverance business is that you take whatever happens and make the best out of it. And that's possible. And I think it takes a certain mindset. It takes a certain bit of a character trait of, you could say it's a glass half empty, half full kind of thing.
Episode number 35. TEDx Unveiled. Crafting Talks That Ignite Change with Dirk Danon.
TEDx organizer?
I think actually across all cultures, a good talk, a passionate sounding talk, is pretty well received. Now, of course, there are intricacies, but I think on the whole, if you're doing a really, really good talk, and if I can refer to TED Talks, there are certain talks, there's certain fundamentals, for example, the use of humor when engaging your audience. Humor, I mean, again, how dangerous can you get to try and use humor? But of course, there are certain rules to humor that work everywhere. It's self-deprecating humor is usually appreciated better than making fun of an audience member, for example. So those types of things can be used. They're widely accepted across cultures. Everybody loves to laugh. So why not use it? When you look at the really good TED Talks, the most widely viewed TED Talks around the world are humorous, engaging, and passionate TED Talks. So there is certainly a lot of intricacies. There definitely are cultural barriers, but I would suggest that anybody coming from North America, Western Europe, Eastern Asia, I think at the end of the day, just the recipe of a good talk is going to be the same. There's that element of the rules and regulations, but I think the other thing is a TED event is, it's mostly half a day, and it's almost a festival of talks. And that's quite difficult if you think about it. I mean, if I go and listen to a festival of music, it's fabulous. There are different varieties of music. But if I just go and listen to somebody talking for 20 minutes and then another 20 minutes, another 20 minutes, it becomes almost impossible to digest all of this information. So there needs to be a really good flow to the event. And that's the wonderful thing about being the host, is that I can walk on stage. I see the audience are all standing there or sitting there, excited. And then when that speaker walks off, I'll walk on stage and I'll see that 90% of the audience have a tissue out and they're crying, and they're, and then I'll pep them back up a little bit to prepare them for the next one. And then I walk on stage after the following speaker and they're all still laughing because they're, it was full chuckles the whole way through. And then the next person comes on stage and they're all just standing there or sitting there in bewilderment. Like, how is this even possible? And they've completely changed their perspective on things. So just to see that wonderful effect through the audience. So when we build a TED event, we're really building that flow. So if I don't know what a speaker is going to say, I don't know where to put that person in the order of the event. So it becomes super, super difficult. And so I really, really need to know all of that.
Dirk, what role does AI have in public speaking, if at all, in terms of the development of ideas, the preparation, and beyond?
So I have to tell you, we just starting off that answer. There's really such an array of responses to AI, and as a teacher, I had a choice as well. The Ministry of Education in Luxembourg sent out an email to all the teachers saying, you may not forbid the use of AI. Now, having said that, the majority of teachers, while they technically don't forbid AI, what they're doing is they're saying you can't use AI to do this particular part of the assignment. So I thought, well, I have a choice here. I can either prepare my students to be ready for the use of AI, or I can go back to teaching the way that I've always taught and just, ignoring that AI even exists.
Episode number 36, The Mischief Generation, with Tom Morley, musician and keynote speaker. What I hear from that, I wrote down: mischief is a combination of inhibition, experience, courage, humility, and egolessness. Maybe not full lack of ego. I've known many actors, is that I heard that acting school, they spend the first year learning to relax in front of the camera, to relax on stage. And this is what I've seen, whether it's Sammy Davis Jr., even watching you in the clips that I've seen of yours, to get to a point of to be uninhibited. What am I like with my kids? What am I like with my late grandmother, who I could be myself? What does that level of
Yeah.
authenticity mean, where I feel no inhibitions? I'm not self-conscious. What does it really mean to be mischievous? Because someone watching this, a CEO or a business leader, they might tune out a little bit and say, you know what? I'm like, are you telling me I should be funny? Because when I think mischievous, I think it's silly. There's a deeper authenticity that accompanies that particular trait, which we don't usually talk about in a leadership or business context, is mischief. We talk about mischief in business. So what I'd love to do is to leave this conversation today with a certain energy that exhibits, that embodies, that elevates those listening and taps into two things that you and I are known for. I help people discover their strengths through handwriting analysis, and you help teams build, elevate, co-create through music, through comedy, and through finding ways to connect them through movement. So let's combine those two right now. So I asked you to put your handwriting, your signature, which you wrote on the spot, I haven't seen ahead of time, up on the screen, and you should be able to see that now. Okay, so when I look at that handwriting, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing in that bottom stroke, that Y, it's so fluid and fast. That's fluency of thought. That's weaving linguistic lassos as you're creating. So your mind is working so fast that once you go, it's hard for you to almost keep up with your hand. You were the kid in school who had your hand up when it came to something that you were passionate about, even before the teacher could finish their sentence. Now, you combine that with that huge loop in your why. I know it's one particular trait that shows a resourcefulness of creativity, someone who works well with their hands, thinks best with their hands, and movement. That's what that fluency, and it goes straight up, it limp off to the side. That's a belief in yourself when it comes to your creativity. Episode number 37, Building Leadership Trust in Sales with Ian Altman, keynote speaker, best-selling author, podcast host, and creator of Same Side Selling Academy.
So in a game, you have a winner and a loser. In a battle, the loser dies. And then we wonder why sales ends up being adversarial with our customers. And instead, the idea of same-side selling, I co-wrote the book with a guy named Jack Quarles. Probably guess with last name like Quarles. Jack spent 2 decades in purchasing and procurement. And what we talk about is what causes these adversarial traps between buyer and seller, and how do we get on the same side, in essence, putting a puzzle together with our customers. So instead, it's not about, can I convince you to buy something? It's more, do your puzzle pieces fit with my puzzle pieces? And if they do, we got something to talk about. And if not, there's no rejection. It's just our pieces don't fit. And that's okay. Let me help you find someone who has the right puzzle pieces. And that integrity-based approach goes a long way.
How has AI impacted sales both positively and negatively?
Well, AI can be extremely valuable. Like, for example, I use some AI tools when it comes to recording and transcribing meetings and writing summaries that streamline the process. The trap that some people fall into is they say, oh, I can use this thing and I don't need to edit it. No. It's a shortcut. It's not a replacement. So if I can get something that does 80% of the job for me, and now I just review it and make sure it's right, that's great. If I use the AI technology as a replacement or alternative, and now it doesn't do a good job, then I kind of look stupid. And so we need to figure out a way to intelligently use this technology and recognize where it has its limitations. So it's funny, if I propose to ChatGPT, if I say, write an email about this product that will attract the interest of a senior executive, it'll write something that a textbook would say would attract somebody. And now if I take that email and I send it to 20 executives and say, who would respond to this? They would all say, oh, I wouldn't respond to it at all. Why? Because the AI says, oh, according to what different people have said, this is what you should put in there, but it doesn't feel human. So what happens is it's overblown. It's like I always tell people, if you're doing cold outreach, people send these cold emails and it's like 4 paragraphs. And I'm like, what's your goal with initial outreach? Well, I want to share this, I want to share this, I want to share that. I'm like, no. Your goal is to start a conversation. So your email is too long. Just, hey, here are the top 3 things that people come to us to solve in your industry. If one of these resonates with you, we might have something worth talking about. And if not, there's no use in us getting together. What do you think? Oftentimes, our clients don't know the difference between what we do and what other people do. And when that happens, we try to often blame the client, but it's really the seller's fault if we haven't helped them understand what's different about them versus us. And so there's a concept I teach called the client vision pyramid. And the idea of the client vision pyramid is as soon as the client expresses an interest in what it is that you do, you define what the market is. So you say, oh, when people are looking for that type of product or service, they're usually looking for someone who can help them at one of 3 levels. See, the industry is kind of shaped like a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid is what we call the effective level. These are people who, and then you kind of describe what they do. And it has to sound good. You can't say, well, sometimes people are looking for this basic level and they suck. No one wants that. So it always has to sound good. And then I say the next level up is what we call the enhanced level. The enhanced level has these additional capabilities and offerings, et cetera. At the highest level, it's where the smallest number of people in our industry, this is where what we call the engaged level, this is where you're dealing with an organization that's focused on your results, measuring the outcomes, making sure the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, getting exactly what you need. Which level are you looking for? And so by defining those levels, the clients can now self-select and say, no, I want that highest level. Or you know what? Yeah, that highest level sounds really good, but we just want this thing at the bottom.
Yeah.
Those people are just going to buy based on price. You can decide if you want to pursue those types of accounts or not. Most of my clients agree that, no, we don't want to pursue them. We let our competitors go after them. We focus on the people who are looking to achieve that highest value.
Episode number 38, Mastering Modern Strategy with Dr. Nick Bontis, keynote speaker, professor, and author.
ChatGPT, you can't fight it. It's a tech war, and it's winning. So, I look at some of my colleagues here. I'm calling you from the university, and, we've got committees here on campus talking about, how are we going to deal with this with students? Should we take it away from them? Should we not have them have access to it? Is it part of the rules of academic freedom and plagiarism? It's the wrong question to ask, Jamie. I look at this like a calculator. All right. In 1975, we were doing math without a calculator. A calculator came out, it became cheap, and now you got to teach math in a different way because you got to assume that every kid by the 80s has a calculator. That's what ChatGPT is going to be. Artificial intelligence is going to be the tool that I possess as a student, as a business person, as an analyst, as an investor, and who can use that tool to the best of our abilities. In fact, in my book, I wrote about singularity. Singularity is this concept in AI where, the consciousness of the computers is as equal or more than what the consciousness of human beings is going to be like. We're close, Jamie. Singularity used to be science fiction, right? I see it like being a couple of years away. ChatGPT's only been around for like a year and a half. I remember it was like, a couple of Christmases ago when it got launched. And now this latest version is unreal. By the time version 5 or 6 comes out, we're each going to have our own AI. I'm going to have my AI in the morning. She's going to wake me up, tell me what I'm going to eat, how I'm going to feel that day. It's going to be, part and parcel of how we live. So when it comes to students, I have to learn now how to assign cases to them, Western case method, knowing that they're going to go to ChatGPT to get the first draft, right? And it doesn't matter what profession you're in. The number one thing that I respect in people is responsiveness. Somebody reaches out to you, you need to be responsive. In a world today where we are bombarded by emails and bombarded by texts and WhatsApp and TikTok, and obviously I wrote the book on information bombardment, I know. If you're not responsive, it is so disrespectful. So,
Yes.
Thank you, Jamie, for saying that, because that's my rule of thumb, man. I don't care where you are in the world. You need to respond to people, even to say, I don't have the answer yet, Jamie. Give me a day, give me 2 days. I'll get the answer to you. And you know what, Jamie? It's not just business people. I'm trying to teach this to my kids because I don't know, man, this new generation of young punks out there, they're all about the WhatsApps and the Snapchats, and they don't like talking to people mano a mano or face to face. So I think if there's one thing that I can deliver to the audience of your podcast today is try to be as responsive as possible, because you know what? People respect that. If somebody emails me and says, we're looking for a keynote speaker at this location on this date, and I respond in 30 seconds, that person will never forget you, Jamie. Never. It is what I call inimitability. It makes me different. You can't copy it if you're too slow and I'm faster than you, right? So responsiveness is important. I respect that. I think strategy now is about resiliency. It's about inimitability. What can you do that nobody else can do? And can you do it fast? That's really what strategy is about. So that's the number one thing I'm talking about in my strategy classes. And my second thing that I'm talking about in my strategy classes is you as an individual, as a knowledge worker, how do you maintain productivity, efficiency? How do you collaborate? So let's talk about collaboration very, very quickly. What I'm finding in the year 2024 is that knowledge is power. What I know versus what you know is going to make the difference, Jamie, in how we compete. And now ChatGPT is trying to be the equalizer to make everybody know the same sorts of things. But here's the truth. We have this new concept now that didn't exist even a few months ago called engineer prompting, right? How do you program to tell ChatGPT something better than what the competition told them to tell you what to do, right? So I find that this is very, very attractive to students. They want to learn how to compete. They want to understand how to use information and knowledge to their benefit. And collaboration is very, very important because in today's world, we're talking to each other with Zoom a lot. COVID didn't do as much good when we were stuck in our homes all that period of time. So, many of us don't have the luxury of speaking to each other face to face, mano a mano, where I look into your eyes. And Jamie, when I look into your eyes and you smile at me and I see the little corners of your eyes, I see things, right? I see that you trust me and that we have rapport and we can communicate. That's what knowledge management is all about. So those are the two main things. What does strategy mean in the year 2024 and beyond? And how can we as knowledge workers collaborate and be productive?
Episode number 40, Never Fly Solo in Leadership with Waldo Waldman, New York Times bestselling author, F-16 fighter pilot retired, and keynote speaker.
You've got to look at the folks, especially on the business side, and say, the relationship's one thing, but then the mission also counts, and our ability to execute the mission, to fly through the tactics and really do the necessary heavy lifting. Hey, we need both. So assess your teammates and your relationships in business through their character, through their authenticity, but make sure they're putting in the work, because you can't bring donuts, for example, to sales meetings. You got to bring solutions, and you need teammates who are tactical, who are able to execute, as well as that have the relationship and core values necessary to execute and win.
And on that note, Waldo, you mentioned in the book this phrase, push it up, to push it up with the team. Can you elaborate on both
Yes.
in war, but also in business?
It's funny because that was the theme of my 14-minute keynote in Las Vegas yesterday for 10,000 Cisco sales reps. It was all about pushing up. It was about unleashing the power of you, that person staring back at you every single day who you need to trust above all else, who you need to know that you can rely on and depend on to do the work. But when we cross the combat line, what's called the FIBA, the forward edge of the battle area, you go master arm, hot, like missiles alive, and then you normally say commit, which means you got to push up the throttle, go to full power if you need to. We're accelerating. We're going after the enemy. We're executing the plan. There's no turning back. You're all in. And so when we look at ourselves and our ability to execute despite economic uncertainty, supply chain challenges, life issues, work-life balance, stress, change, being overwhelmed, hey, When you push up that throttle, it means you're fully committing yourself to executing. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're not sure of the outcome, especially when there's enemy aircraft and missiles coming across the border. So that's the test of leadership. That's the test of resilience. That's the test of building trust. How do you operate and push it up, even though you may want to pull it back? Because ultimately, as business partners, as people building relationships, and maybe as parents, others are dependent on you to push it up. And it's easy to do so when the skies are blue and there's no enemy in the air, right?
Can you talk a little bit about what you think are a few of the key fundamental components of effective preparation, both in your career and in life?
Well, I always like to say, wingmen never wing it. You can't fly by the seat of your pants. You can't lead a business or lead a sales team and make a cold call or do a social media post or lead an interview on a podcast by the seat of your pants. It takes due diligence. We have a saying in the military, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in battle. And the winners and the top guns in life, I think, are the ones who are often doing the things behind the scenes. I think what I'm mostly afraid of is being average. And what I mean by that, it's like I'm always pushing myself to improve. I'm always pushing myself to get better, to expand my business, to expand my life, etc. And it's not a good fear, I think. It's like the thing that gives me validity in saying, like, my business is solid and it fluctuates, and I'm fortunate, but I still have some panic moments like we all do. It's okay with being average. It's okay with not having to do more. It's not having to, quote unquote, succeed. Many of us need to just put our jets in the hangar after flying all our kick-ass combat missions, so to speak, and just retool and refuel our mentality. Tighten down the rivets, get into more self-love. I took up transcendental meditation recently. I'm doing yoga, doing things that I wouldn't have done a year or 5 years ago. But I know my life's changing. And so part of me is saying, okay, if I can't be extraordinary in the business world, say, and I think I'm relatively extraordinary in some ways and average to mediocre to poor in others, can't be all things to all people. If I can look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm working on myself, I'm helping others, I'm building relationships with people who have no interest in me other than building a friendship.
Episode number 41, Improving Well-Being at Work, with Jennifer Donnie, the CEO and founder of Welloga, and co-host Erica M., Canadian icon and entrepreneur.
One of the biggest roadblocks I've learned to overcome, which I feel like is a big win for Welloga, is we always ask the team what they want. Nobody wants to be told what to do. So you could have the best leader in the world saying, oh, let's do wellness, but you can't just hand something to someone, even though it's supposed to help them feel better and get them to be excited about it. People want to be involved. So we have sort of a second tier with Welloga, big strategy part. And then we take that strategy in a condensed format and we run a half-a-day wellness program with all of the employees. And they get like mini wellness workshops and they vote on site on their phone to say, we want meditation, we want breathing, we want 20 minutes, we want midday. And they kind of vote for everything. And then we tighten up what that annual strategy and the program looks like. And you think about mental health, of course, is the topic today. Now, if people have strong mental health, of course, they're going to be better at their jobs. But let's talk about what that is. That's about having a positive mindset. That's about awareness. That's about adaptability. That's about resilience. That's about, the language that you use, the words and the thoughts that you use. It's all of these different things, Erica. And each one of those things I just listed can be taught in a workshop, teaching people how to be more resilient and teaching people how to be adaptable. You mentioned something around leadership and empathy. We could talk about emotional health. How important is it for people to be able to manage their emotions in the workplace? It's really easy to kind of get hot and fired up, right? And we're not really taught how to manage that. It doesn't mean your emotions aren't valid, but the faster you can get rid of that, the more easily you can do your job. And I think empathy falls in there too, around leadership, right? That's an emotion. It's a way that we and Jamie, I know that this is an area of your expertise as well when it comes to leaders and being able to manage people from an empathetic standpoint, right? And understanding where people are in their shoes. And look, both Jamie and Erica, there's other examples. If you're socially connected the way you should be, I know everybody says they want to work remotely, but lots of people are feeling isolated and not connected with the bigger business, right? I think people talk about anxiety more freely now, but I also think it's generational. I think younger people tend to talk about their emotions and how they feel and this sort of uncertainty, stress and anxiety, almost like it's a sign on their shirt, like I have anxiety, where somebody who's older would say, no, I would never talk about that, right? Because we didn't do that in the workplace before. So number one, I'm going to make two comments about this. This is probably a passion subject of mine, is that there's many different generations in any business now, right? There's really four. And each of them have different values and different beliefs, and they've all kind of grown up in a different set of circumstances. And so when you talk about something like stress and anxiety, everybody wants to learn about the education part because they're all experiencing things in different ways. So I think when it comes to speakers and who we bring on board and who's talking to them, they need to be, an up-to-date voice, somebody who can talk to people about it in a way that's going to resonate with all these different generations, right? Somebody who can really connect with the audience and answer questions. I wanted to wrap up their question here by saying that doing education in a group setting, so talk about any sensitive topic, stress, anxiety, dealing with difficult managers, like anything, right? Where people don't want to stand out, having a session where you've got an expert speaking on this topic, even if people have their cameras off and choose not to be interactive in the session, it's still a wonderful way of getting everybody the same information without calling anybody out.
Episode number 42, Trump vs. Harris, Beyond the Signature with Michelle Dresbold, FBI forensic handwriting profiler and behavior expert, and Jamie Mason Cohen, host of the Signature Leadership Show and keynote speaker.
Some people will talk about Donald Trump as someone whose mental faculties are slowing down. And in fairness, we're talking about a signature from several years ago. Yet when I look at this signature, without bias, when I'm just looking at the signature, the level of those upward strokes, the analytical, the investigative, the curiosity on the upward zone, and also that wedge at the bottom, that V shape, that looks to me as someone who is very sharp and fast when they're in some type of a debate, some type of dialogue. They're fast thinking. How would you analyze his mental faculties on several levels?
Okay, as you said, it would be very interesting to see his handwriting now. And I have a feeling it has changed a little bit because he seems to have changed. So when you change, your handwriting changes. Those angles do show sharpness and picking up things very, very quickly. Now that's his signature. We'd have to. I have seen his writing in general, but his signature on a surface basis, he's going to pick something up very, very quickly and be able to respond. Those are those high angles and those dips that look V-shaped. That means you dig into something. So very, very quickly, he would be able to look at you and look at me and go, she's thinking this, he's thinking that. He picks those things up. That is a gift that he does have.
How might he behave if he loses the election? Is there anything we can decipher or decode within the handwriting that shows any difference than the way he responded last time?
Like I said, we're going to have to write him a letter and have him give us some new handwriting to see if he's different. His old handwriting, which, we've been looking at for years, if he lost, he was not going to take it easily. When you have all those angles in the middle, there's a big X in his handwriting too. That means don't cross me.
Yes.
So I would love to see if that X has disappeared from his handwriting, but I have a feeling he would much prefer to win. He is not a good loser. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have those high initial letters, high zones, which means they crave recognition. But when you look at her last name, it means that last name, you can't read it at all.
Yeah.
And that's something different than when you think you can read something, but you can't. So her last name, not being able to read it, actually means that her last name, if you probably check back whatever Harris meant to her, isn't that important. And she wanted to make it on her own, not whatever that Harris last name meant. But that first K is actually more important than the last name, because it's the thing of thinking you can read somebody, thinking you can read that K, but you really can't. And that's more important than a signature that you can't read. A lot of people make a line, you can't read it. They just don't want you to read them. When someone makes something on purpose that you can't read, that's very significant. Well, I'll tell you something about, and it's not his handwriting, it's his wife's, Melania. When I first saw Melania's handwriting, I thought it was a joke, because it looks like Donald Trump's handwriting, all those angles, but it's a little curvier. And I'm like, oh, someone's making a joke of Donald Trump's handwriting, saying it's Melania, just this, angular, but put a little curve in it. And it was hers, and it is hers. And I always wondered, do they get along? Do they think alike? When you have handwriting that looks like somebody else's, the two of you actually think a lot alike. So as tough as you think Donald Trump is, Melania may be a little tougher.
Episode 43, How Men Can Navigate Midlife Transformation and Professional Rebirth, with Greg DeCoker, culture and brand expert and strategist, and co-host Pascal with Score Contour, strategist and master storyteller.
So how can I help them leverage their brand, one of their biggest competitive advantages, to create a uniquely remarkable brand, a brand so great that people remark about it, they talk about it, they rave about it, they become fans. I want to help to build a brands from the inside out, right? So that's really my focus, and culture is a big part of it. I look at it as two sides of the same coin. And in creating that uniquely, highly differentiated brand, coaching people on how do we use that to drive every decision, curate every experience, discover and achieve every single goal, that we do, including developing our culture, high performing, high functioning culture, which I think is, again, another one of the biggest competitive advantages. And that's beyond 30 seconds.
Do you tailor your resume to highlight relevant skills from the past 10 to 15 years and position yourself as a solution to a company's problems rather than appearing as an overqualified candidate? That's what Harvard Business School said is a real challenge about how to balance that. How do you showcase your experience without seeming overqualified? Any ideas?
It is one of the things I happen to do, teaching and also working with customers. And I'm a big believer that you need what I call an alignment between your purpose and the vision, for instance, of an organization. And the vision and the mission and the value proposition, the same thing inside of an organization. And if you have that, then you will probably introduce yourself in a different way. It's not going to be anymore a feeling of bragging what you do, what you know, what you've experienced, but it's got to be much more focused. As Greg said, how can you help people? How can you make them feel happy in his particular case? And you're going to just give a number of elements to showcase that. So through that grapevine, if I may say so, you're going to let transpire your knowledge and how you can help people, but you're not bragging. And at the same time, you're very reassuring, I believe.
What lessons have you learned about leadership through building leaders in companies?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Erica, in my past life, I used to work with all the key stakeholders in business. So I worked in retail. So sitting at a table with a bunch of strong personalities, with strong agendas, sometimes all leading in different directions, is not something that is unfamiliar to me. And my job was really to kind of, I guess, bring peace and harmony even at that time, even though it was about building a department store. But I understand what it's like to work with lots of different voices. And what have I learned about this from building Wologa? I would say that your program is never going to be successful unless the leadership is on board. I could give you crazy numbers that, like, if a CEO shows up to an event, we'll call an event, one of these workshops or something like, it's like 4 times the amount of participation, if not more, because people want to know that the CEO or the leaders are human and that they also, experience the same things that everybody else does. It's just making them feel more cohesive, like more like a group.
So, I don't know if that answers your question, but being passionate and loving and being dynamic, what you do, I mean, it helps you in everything, Jamie. Your kids, your school, your profession, your wife. Be passionate about, who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. All these things, and I think you're right. You started the conversation today talking about the influence of my parents had on me. It was probably my parents that taught me how to be passionate about whatever you're doing, and I'm trying to instill that now in the next generation as well.
Well, folks, that brings us to another extraordinary episode of the Signature Leadership Show, where we help world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves. We hope you enjoyed this special compilation, a journey through some of the most memorable moments from our past episodes. It's been a blast reliving those enlightening conversations and incredible stories with you all. And remember, if you missed any of our previous episodes, now's the perfect time to catch up. We were just rated one of the top independent podcasts on Good Pods platform. As we wrap up today, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to all our extraordinary guests who have shared their knowledge, their vulnerability, their insights, and stories with us. It's their voices and experiences that have made this podcast what it is today. If you have been with us since the beginning, thank you for your unwavering support. And if you're a new listener, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show. We have a treasure trove of past episodes waiting for you to explore, so be sure to check them out. Before I say goodbye, remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us improve with each episode. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media at Jamie Mason Cohen to stay updated on future episodes and exciting, relevant, useful, leadership-based content.